shoulders, I throw my hands up like I'm reaching for something. Like a bar I set too high for myself. Because if I were to show them that I can grow to the size of my perfection, then they won't see that I actually just grew to the size of my grief. Thought I'd try it on for size, even though not many things fit me. Even though this world wasn't made for me, even when my own skin doesn't fit me. A whopping 5 feet of body, but I grew an extra inch of clever, an extra inch of wit, an extra inch of desperation, an extra inch of survival, an extra inch for the times that the boys said that if I wanted to play, I'd have to keep up. Didn't say that to the boys who couldn't keep up, an extra inch of bronze muscle to prove to my mother I could be someone else, and pray to her God for him to just make me tall enough so I can outgrow the part where I bleed like other girls do. Because these days I'd rather just risk bleeding like other queers do. With every strap of my binder, shoulders rolled back, every gasp of my breath suffocating the girl, I will drown my mother's voice out too. And I want that most days, until it actually fades away. Like her body did, like her ghost did, like my mind did. When I grew that extra inch, that time I sat stretched out in the back seat of the cop car, pulled between my father's grasp in the middle seat and my forehead longing to be pressed against the glass, his weeping hug. The kind of hug that wasn't for me. The kind that left my body still while his God pulled out a pocket lighter and burned holes in my safety net. It's that kind of stillness where body stood paralyzed while my drunk mother, bloodshot eyes, screamed final breaths over the body of her dead son. It was that extra inch I grew in that dark parking lot that night waiting outside of the hospital, when her hands were ripped from my hands, stretched between her drunken gaze and my numb, pulled between her desperation and someone else's will for me to survive that night. It was in that rapid growth that night that I convinced myself to play small inside.
Describes you as towering, has come to consider the 14 inches she imagined above your head to be the phantom height of having grown the size of your grief. Your 9th therapist said you would need to eat before you could lift your fear from that sunken chest for her dissection, said trauma is so heavy, it's okay that you can't carry it yet. Countless corpse brides looked out at you from their dead and dripping drugged eyes in their folding plastic group chairs and said things like, worried they would be crushed if I told them. It's so much I just drown in it. And maybe that's true. Maybe the story that Emily's mind told her while she slept thrashing in the cot next to yours on the adolescent unit crushed her parents like a player piano out a 16-story window. Maybe Charlotte's lungs filled with fists when she dove into the one-way bar brawl of her drunken stepbrother. Maybe that 9th therapist toned and built muscles out of the cornhusk dolls slumped into her couch until they could lift the monster trucks of their trauma from the ditches of their denial. But you remember the first time, the only time you ever held something as small and warm and soft as your grief, as the fear that makes nests in the branches of your ribcage, 7 hours old and fallen from a tree in that storm that took out your power for 2 weeks. How you wrapped it in your jacket and carried it home, afraid to drop something not even solid enough to shatter. So when they tell you you've grown the size of your grief, you want to say you've grown the size of your silence, the size of the cogs that grind your denial into the lies you tell yourself to fall asleep at night, or the truths you pretend to understand. See, it's easy to grow. You built 22 years worth of a boy's body from the quiet quiet, slow whispers of a girl's hunger. You built totalitarian gods from pocket Bibles and floated bookshelves from the words you still can't say out loud. Darling, if trauma were ocean, solid wooden ivory, stick shift, long highway, tower. Mechanic grease and erase the town you broke down in from every map. Plummets depths with an oxygen tank strapped, obligation heavy to your back. Cut it down, become the smoothest swing of an axe. But darling, it is so small that if you ever grew the size of your grief, you wouldn't even be big enough to snap between fingers. You might just disappear. So you don't come to your grief with elbow grease and wrench and tear at wheel from axle. To your fear with a wetsuit and a mask. To your shame with strong jaws and phantom stature, you come with a blanket. Shaking palms, strip down, kneel. Believe that someday you will grow the size of your patience, the size of your humility, the size of yourself. And despite what they've told you, you will not be brave, brandished bare knuckles colliding with the jaws of your ghosts. You'll be gentle, open hand over your chest, waiting for the subtle ache. Breathing so quietly you could hear a pin drop in a hurricane. Inventing antonyms for brace yourself. Living every memoir of good survivor cover to cover in reverse. The moved on and life is beautiful stage. The atrocities are mud for the lotus stage. The drunken rages, the coy stoicism, the jagged confusion, the repressed numbness of pretending normalcy, and finally, the tiny limbs of trust and betrayal tangled on the floor of your mother's house. The fresh shame scratching at your corneas. The first broken moment of helplessness, so soft you couldn't even break with the bow. Enter a vision, you stop trying to. You bruise like flesh, skin a storm warning. You cry like your life depends on it, because it does.
Watch myself outgrow this part. That box I made for myself, lined with barbed wire and no trespassing sign. Guard dogs and a secret entrance. The one that no longer fits and no one can tell me why. The one I know as a place already outgrown, so I can find the places I deserve to inhabit. Like a summer night under blankets of stars, or a moving sidewalk under dancing feet, or the space under the moon that won't stop watching, like my softening gut, like my bones filling with a mother's soft voice reading me to sleep. Because my grief is not a fairy tale, but a singing place calling me to come home. So if I were to grow to the size of my grief, I would actually grow to the size of the search for my truth. Like a map to freedom in my skin, or one step closer to letting my bones off the hook, or something that sounds dreamy but certainly doesn't feel that way all the time. I would grow to the size of the cry of that itching thing I've felt for a while, but never had the courage to scratch. Never had the strength to reach my hand to body, with every ounce of patriarchy's grip pulling it away. I would grow to the size of the one step forward I take, even with my own mother's grief tied to my ankles, like that ball and chain I was gifted as a forgotten child longing for freedom. Or I'd grow to the size of what it would be like to breathe again, to let these binder straps wrap me so tightly that the fabric begins to break, and we unravel together in the softness of time. Or I'd grow to the size of a utopia that isn't a place, but a process itself, the very act of engaging with the tension of resistance. Or maybe it's just in the sweetness of knowing that if even for a moment there could be a day where I feel understood. Or there could be a day where I don't have to. Because even in the opacity of this world, there is love. And maybe I don't have to be understood to be loved. And maybe I don't have to keep adding inches of grief because numbers become irrelevant when time slips away and the clock breaks and the oceans fade and I can breathe again. And I can grieve again. So I won't grow to the size of my grief because I'm actually just growing to the size of me. This whomping 5 feet of body that's grown so strong that finally even my own broken heart can't break it.